You can disable the camera, block the microphone, and uninstall half your apps. But as long as Google services exist inside your Android, the system still knows where you are, who you're with, and what's happening on your screen. This is Android Broadcast. In this episode, we'll figure out what you actually need to turn off on your phone to reduce tracking without breaking usability. And we'll also take a look at one of the most well-known de-Googled operating systems, GrapheneOS. While you're powering on your brand new phone for the first time, choosing a language and connecting to Wi-Fi, the system is already at work. Background services start, system components initialize, and network connections are established, not because you manually allowed it, but because that's how the operating system is designed out of the box. Android is technically open. Its base, AOSP, is publicly available. But it isn't a finished operating system. It's a framework meant to be built upon. Think of it like a construction kit. The core pieces are on the table, but there's no complete product you can ship as is. Some parts you have to implement yourself, others you buy from vendors who already did. Every phone we actually buy isn't just Android. It's Android plus Google services. And this is important. Google Play Services is not an app store. It's a system layer responsible for push notifications, participates in location detection, synchronizes data and backups, performs app security checks, and links dozens of system components together. That's why most apps on your device work. And without Google services, many of them simply won't.
No.
Push notifications are critical functionality, but they're only a small part of what Google services do on Android. The problem is they don't operate as separate modules. They function as a single, tightly integrated system component. You can't just disable everything and keep push. And that's where the core paradox appears. A modern smartphone holds an enormous amount of personal data, access to bank accounts and payments, work email, photos and videos, private and business chats, location history, health metrics, activity data, basically everything that can be collected, is the most detailed digital profile of a person. At the same time, users don't see most background activity. System services are trusted by default, and behavior at that level can't be fully controlled through settings. You simply cannot meaningfully restrict how these components collect and transmit data. In the Android Broadcast Telegram channel, I put together a short checklist. What you can disable and tweak in Android today. The link is in the description. I also share a lot more about modern Android and development around it there. And this is where it becomes obvious. Android was originally designed as a system where the user is not the administrator of the device, but a participant in an ecosystem with predefined rules. Rules you either accept during setup or you don't use the device at all. That's a choice that barely feels like a choice. So the real question becomes, can you change anything without breaking everyday usability, or at least understand where the boundary of your control actually is? And the answer to that question is GrapheneOS. Let's start with the core idea. GrapheneOS is a non-profit operating system based on AOSP, built specifically for people who care about privacy and security. But unlike many other privacy-focused ROMs, GrapheneOS doesn't just strip out Google services. It fundamentally changes the security model at the system level. The project began in 2014 as a technical experiment by a security researcher. The idea was simple but ambitious. Build a mobile OS where security isn't an add-on, it's the foundation. A system designed to defend against entire classes of vulnerabilities, including ones vendors haven't even discovered yet. And an important detail, today GrapheneOS is not a one-person project, but a non-profit foundation supported by an open community of developers. The entire codebase remains open source, all changes are public, and any qualified engineer can audit exactly what the system is doing under the hood. Among all fully de-Googled Android projects, GrapheneOS stands out for one key reason. It doesn't just remove Google from Android, it rethinks the mobile security model itself. Because Android is open source, the community has built plenty of alternative ROMs to replace the software that ships with your phone. Most of them take stock Android and remove certain components. GrapheneOS takes a different approach. It adds hardening at layers most users never even see. Memory management, the boot process, process isolation, all while trying not to break application compatibility. That's why GrapheneOS is often mentioned in discussions about journalists, activists, and security professionals. Not because it's a paranoid ROM, but because it's one of the few systems designed around real-world threat models from day one. Let's make this concrete. Take two devices, a standard Pixel running stock Android and the same Pixel running GrapheneOS. What's actually different? First, why Pixel? Not because I personally use one. GrapheneOS officially supports only Pixel devices due to specific hardware security features provided by Google that most other Android vendors simply don't offer. The first major difference, GrapheneOS ships without any pre-installed Google apps or services. You can install them along with other software through GrapheneOS's built-in app repository. Google Play is installed separately from Google Play services. Don't want Google Play? You can use MicroG instead and keep core functionality without handing over full control to Google. And even if you install Google Play services, they don't behave the way they do on stock Android. They run inside the standard app sandbox just like any other third-party application. They have no privileged access by default. Every permission must be explicitly granted. The second major improvement is an enhanced permission model. I've been waiting for Android to allow apps access to specific contexts instead of the entire address book, including future updates. I don't want to grant broad file system access either. I want to share specific files or directories. In GrapheneOS, that granularity already exists, and apps continue to function normally. Google, when are we getting that? On top of that, applications in GrapheneOS have no network access by default. If you don't explicitly grant the network permission, all outbound requests simply fail. It's also a great way to test how an app behaves without connectivity. GrapheneOS also includes hardening against both known and future classes of vulnerabilities. First, it reduces the attack surface wherever possible. And if an attacker does find an exploit, executing it is significantly harder than on standard Android. And for additional isolation, users can explicitly separate apps using different user profiles. For example, banking apps in one profile, messengers in another. In that setup, apps have no visibility into each other's data, effectively behaving as if they're running on two separate devices. And that's still not everything. GrapheneOS introduces security improvements across virtually every subsystem of Android. Listing them all would take a while. The full and constantly updated feature set is always available on the project's official website. Sounds great, right? Full control, no hidden services, advanced hardening everywhere. But GrapheneOS isn't just stock Pixel, but better. It's a different philosophy, and you pay for that in convenience. Let's start with the most noticeable one, biometrics. Face Unlock doesn't work at all. It's Google's proprietary implementation, and GrapheneOS doesn't include it. So you're back to a PIN or fingerprint every time. Sounds manageable? Try unlocking your phone 50 times a day when you're used to just glancing at the screen. And Face Unlock inside apps, banking, payments, messengers, also doesn't work. That's not a bug. But in daily life, it absolutely feels like a step backward. Next, Google services. Yes, you can install them in the sandbox. Yes, most apps will function. But there are trade-offs. Push notifications may arrive with delays, especially if you've aggressively restricted background activity. Chromecast or Android TV integration can be unreliable. Automatic backups to Google Photos require manual setup and won't feel as seamless as on stock Android. Features like Smart Lock, based on location or trusted devices, simply unavailable. Then there's app compatibility. GrapheneOS passes many security checks, but not all. Some banking apps may refuse to run, particularly those that rely heavily on Google Play services integrity checks. Streaming services can also be problematic because certain DRM implementations may not function as expected. And you won't necessarily know in advance. You'll find out only when you try a specific app, or when something breaks after an update. And speaking of updates, the team works fast and aims to ship them as quickly as possible, but there's still an inherent delay compared to Google's own releases. And ultimately, you're relying on a relatively small group of developers. None of this is a flaw, it's a deliberate trade-off. GrapheneOS was never meant to be more convenient than stock. It was built to restore control, for those willing to pay for it with time and changed habits. If you have a Pixel lying around and decide to try GrapheneOS, the installation process itself isn't complicated. You don't need to be a hardcore power user. Installing it is about as straightforward as installing a browser. Go to the official GrapheneOS website. And this matters. Don't search for download GrapheneOS free no SMS. Use the official domain. I'll leave the link in the description. There you'll find a detailed installation guide that can be completed entirely from your browser simply by connecting your phone over USB. Now let me share my personal experience running GrapheneOS on my Pixel 9 Pro. I installed it, configured everything, and planned to live with it for at least a week. I lasted 1 day. The issue isn't that the system is bad. GrapheneOS works exactly as advertised. Every permission is explicit. Every app is sandboxed, no hidden background components. The issue is that this is the real cost of control. Simple actions that used to just work turned into a chain of confirmations. Open a link, grant network permission, attach a photo in a messenger, confirm file access. Want notifications on time? Configure background execution exceptions. Face unlock stopped working. Now it's fingerprint or PIN every single time. You might say that's normal, but once you're used to seamless unlock, going back feels friction heavy, and you adapt to convenience very quickly. Google Photos, which I use for cloud storage, occasionally synced with noticeable delays. I'd sit down at my computer expecting my photos to be there, and they simply weren't yet. I realized I personally couldn't live without the behavior I'm used to from Google Play services. Yes, you can install them inside GrapheneOS. And at some point I asked myself, why? I'm a content creator. My life is already public. I'm not conducting investigations, not handling confidential sources, not storing state secrets. I don't really have anything to hide. For me, convenience turned out to matter more than absolute control. And that's fine. GrapheneOS isn't for everyone. It's for people who genuinely value control over convenience. If that's not you, there's no need to force it. Stock Android with reasonable privacy settings works perfectly well for most use cases. That's not weakness. That's not irresponsibility. It's a conscious choice between two values: control and convenience. GrapheneOS is like driving a manual transmission. Yes, you have more control over the car, but in city traffic, most people will choose an automatic. And that's completely reasonable. What matters is understanding what you're choosing and why. And ultimately, what runs on your device should be your decision. If you found this useful, hit like and let me know in the comments. Would you try GrapheneOS, or does convenience win for you? I'm genuinely curious how many people are ready for that trade-off.